welcome to Beyond the Business Suit Live. My name is Kylie Carr. I am so happy to be here today to have this very important conversation, a very timely conversation with someone who I respect and admire so much. So, let me tell you about our guest that we have with us today. We have Denise Hamilton. And Denise is a nationally recognized workplace culture expert and consultant. She is the founder and CEO of Watch Her Work, which is a digital learning platform for professional women, and All Hands Group, a workplace culture consultancy. She is an in-demand speaker and facilitator, and if you have ever heard her speak or know anyone who has heard her speak, then you already know that she brings down the house. She allows people to really see different perspectives. She has worked with and presented to dozens of Fortune 500 companies. And we are here today primarily to talk about her new book, which just dropped back in February, which is called Indivisible: How to Forge Our Differences into a Stronger Future. So let me welcome Denise Hamilton to the stage. Welcome, Denise.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here with you.
I am so looking forward to all that's going to come out of this conversation, even in the short period of time as we were getting ready to go live. I was like, ooh, say that again. Say that again. Excuse me. There's so many. It seems too small to say nuggets of
Mm.
wisdom in this book because in this age of the attack, honestly, that has been on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and really suppression of the efforts that so many people have worked so hard to, have out in the world. There's a lot of just misinformation. There's a lot of just contention in the world about DEI efforts. And honestly, as I was saying to you before we started recording, I've seen a lot of people who are in this space that come to the work from a place of anger or you better or what have you. And you did not do that
Mm.
in this book. You wrote something that's so thoughtful, so thorough, with such compassion and grace, and I just have to thank you for putting this out in the world.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I wanted to remind us what the goal was. It was starting to feel like we had lost the plot, of what the objective is. And I think very often it's not hurdles and barriers from our goals that stop us from reaching them. It's the danger of a lesser goal, the ease of a lesser goal. And I feel like we've settled for like a Noah's Ark, two of each kind of approach, as opposed to like what the actual target is. And for me, the target is to be indivisible, right? To have this space and a place where if you have a gift, you have a talent, and we all do, you have the path and the opportunity to share that gift in an unfettered way. It's not, you don't have arbitrary barriers and hurdles that stop you from being fully great, right? And so that's what the goal of all of this work has been, in my estimation. And I wanted to remind everyone of that. I think when you do this work, it's really important that you do it from the scar and not from the wound. And
Ooh.
what I mean by that is you have to be healed. You have to have a certain level of healing. We all have challenges, pain, trauma, disappointments that we bring into these spaces. And if we don't heal that, we're not in a position to help other people heal. Like, it's too easy to have this work be therapy, and it's not therapy. You are there to lift people up and to help them to be better. And I think I just wanted to remind everyone of that. So your words are super encouraging to me. I'm so glad it was impactful and that you got something out of it.
Yeah, it was. And, these concepts, as you're talking to leaders and organizations, you also, towards the end of the book, you made a point about, we spend something like, if I get this right, if I can get this right, 90,000 hours of our lives at work. And that really resonated with
Mhm.
me, given the work that I do around conscious leadership. And I do believe that our societies will shift, our communities will shift if we can start these conversations at work, or at least continue the conversations at work. So we mentioned the title.
Yeah.
You started to talk a little bit about what it means to be indivisible, or what it means for you. I know this is growing up in public schools. I said it just about every day at school, not really understanding truly what it means. So, what does indivisible mean to you?
Yeah. Yeah, same. Here's this word that we've said all of our lives, and I was like, what does this mean? And I've actually never heard it in any other context other than the Pledge of Allegiance. And the kind of irony of it, as I was thinking about what I saw as the problem, it was this idea that, first of all, we talk about this work like it's my responsibility to teach you and to help you. No, it's not. We are all owners of this experience and of this space, right? And so our goal should be that every single part of the space is functioning at the highest level possible. The best metaphor that I use for the concept of being indivisible is the human body, right? The lungs and the heart don't argue. The brain and the heart, they don't argue. Wait, which one of us is more important? Which one of us is more significant? That's not a conversation that happens. Your muscles in your legs are the largest, strongest muscle group in your body, and they can take you anywhere in the world. You can go with these legs, but you are going exactly nowhere if the tiny little structures in your ear don't take care of your balance, right? It's all connected. There's not one piece or part that's more important than the other, right? They're all valuable. And a body that is operating at this highest function, every single element is doing their thing, is working their particular magic. We have grown comfortable with under preparing, under equipping huge swaths of our body, right? And we wonder why things aren't going well. They aren't going well because we're not making sure that everyone has the ability to operate at their highest functioning, right? I have a recurring nightmare that the cure for cancer was already born. It was just born in the wrong neighborhood. And that's why we don't have it. We cannot afford to waste human creativity, human ingenuity, human genius. We just can't afford it. And we waste it every day by the decisions that we make and the ways we operate in some of these spaces. So for me, the concept of like working towards indivisibility, working towards being a body that is healthy and whole and fully functioning, that benefits all of us. That's not something that just, because I'm Black or because I'm a woman, that doesn't just benefit me. That benefits all of us if everybody is chipping in, right? And so you think about even the fact that of how we got to the moon, right? We've all seen the amazing movie Hidden Figures. And you think about how each piece of that puzzle had to work for us to achieve this incredible goal, right? And that's still true today. And so, are we creating spaces where everyone can bring their A game? Because that's what I want. I want everybody to be the best that they can be in the space. And so the spaces are functioning at the highest level possible. And we are all benefiting from the giftedness of each other. So that's what it means to me. And to me, that's the filter I run everything through. Who does this help? Who does this hurt? When we make a decision, are we limiting any group? Are we restricting, or are we expanding the opportunities for people to come into this space and to contribute?
Oh, that's so good. I love that illustration of the human body. And we are all better together. We are all better together. And if we can just turn off the news and, heal the wounds and suppress the fears that we have, then we would be in a much better place. So I'm curious what led you to this work, because it's evolved
Yeah.
over the years. And I know that we had a conversation on Beyond the Business Suit years ago talking about the great work that you have done with Watch Her Work. And so take us through some of the evolution of you and your journey.
Yeah, well, I was an executive for 25 years. I know everybody's doing the math. Oh, yeah, how old is she? Wait a
I
minute.
know, looking like she's over here at 27 years old. I
I
mean,
I wish. I've been doing this a long time.
that
You know,
skin though.
thank you, Melanin. Thanks, Melanin. But I was executive for a really long time, and I was the only or the first woman or Black person in almost every job I've ever had. So because of that, I became kind of a lightning rod for mentorship. Like everybody wanted to take me lunch. I could have had coffee 11 times a day, right? And I was like, there's a need here. There's a gap, because people wanted to know what the cheat code was to be successful in these environments. And so I started Watch Her Work and really focused on executive coaching and speaking, presenting, working, building this library of advice for professional women. We could share best practices. And as I was going into organizations and presenting to the women, I was a little bit convicted, because I was like, I'm telling them they can do anything. I'm telling them that there are opportunities that they need to avail themselves of. And I was like, are there? Am I sure they can actually thrive in this environment? And so I started talking to the leaders to make sure that what I'm saying to these women is actually in operation in this actual organization, and started doing tons more work with leaders about making the space for women and other marginalized populations within their organizations to actually thrive. So like, let's make it true. Bishop Desmond Tutu has an amazing quote. He said, it's great to be pulling people out of the river, but at some point you have to go upstream and see who's pushing them in, right? And so like, what are the conditions that are created that either allow someone to thrive and excel in this space, or that causes them to stagnate? And so I got really dialed into that part of the work. And that was, to me, not more effective, but differently effective. I know you work so much around leaders and the fact that, if you don't have the leaders kind of together, people try to do a lot of change from the middle or the bottom of the organization, but it's really about that leadership. And so I started doing tons of work and lots of closed door work, because I think one of the things that's really important to be honest about is that just because you know how to sell sprockets, just because you know how to make dinglebackers, that doesn't mean you understand these issues. And I think a lot of people are afraid. They're afraid to say, I don't know. I don't know how to do this, or I don't know how to handle this. So I think one of the things that's been really successful in my business is giving people a space to ask the difficult questions, or the stupid questions, right? And to be able to save face, and to allow them to have dignity as they develop and learn about the best ways to interact with different populations, and to create the space for them. So doing tons of that work, and so much of that shows up in the book, of showing kind of like where people actually get it wrong, or where they really struggling. It's not the obvious places. And also to channel a little optimism, right? Because I'm in these closed door sessions with these leaders, I am seeing their hearts. I am seeing the effort and sometimes the confusion and the fact that they may be ill-equipped, but that isn't the same as being unwilling, right? And so how do we provide support so that the whole body moves forward together, right? So that's kind of what brought us, you know, to this point today of where I am, and really in the book wanted to share what I see as the actual challenges, not the stuff that is on all the bumper stickers and all the and also there's another piece of this that's really interesting, and where I'm a little bit different than most people in this space, is that I work with a lot of conservative um industries, late adopter industries, right? That aren't at the tip of the sphere, at the tip of the spear of this discussion. They are not, they're just starting on this journey. And I love that spot. I love that spot where a lot of people really resist going into those environments. I love it because you can make the most change, right? It's you can do so much to take somebody from a 1 to a 4 or 5, as opposed to 6.5 to 6.75 at other organizations. So yeah, it's been a really interesting ride. Lots of stories. Some of them are in the book. Lots and lots of stories. But it's been a fantastic journey.
Oh, that's beautiful. I'm curious, given that you have worked with so many organizations in conservative industries, let me put out a scenario. There is an organization,
Mhm.
they are in a conservative industry. Maybe they're, not the early adopter, they're late adopters. They're wondering how this impacts them or how it benefits them, and maybe they were having making some strides and some taking some steps ahead back in 2020, 2021, but maybe over the past 6 to 9 months they've taken a step back, given some of the rulings and what's happening in the political landscape. Let's say I'm a leader at this organization, and I truly see what's possible.
Yeah.
Maybe I read Indivisible and I'm feeling inspired. I'm feeling the optimism and the hope. What, how can I bring people to where I am? How can I take this organization to where it could be,
Yeah.
given where we are in 2024?
Yeah, I think it's really important to challenge people as to what their actual values are, right? Like that's been my secret weapon. What are your values? Um, what do you feel is what are the values that drive and animate your decision making? Um, because if your values are driving how you are proceeding, then it won't really matter what's happening outside. And I've seen a lot of organizations that have not only stuck with this work, but they've doubled down on it, right? Like they're doubly committed, which gives me so much encouragement, right? There's a lot of noise about it, but that's intentional. I think one of the things I talk about in the book is how language is so difficult right now, how easily our language is manipulated. I heard somebody say the other day that the doors flying off of the Boeing plane is because of DEI. When the bridge was hit in Baltimore, they called the mayor a DEI mayor. I'm like, I think people have just grabbed
Oh, wow.
terminology with the intention of bastardizing it, right? Of making it unrecognizable. Okay, honey, I don't care what you call it. I don't care what I care that you do the work and that you are committed to the excellence of your team and the access that if somebody in your team is gifted, that they have the opportunity to shine. That's what I care about. And so I really challenge people to not accept other people's framing or defining of a space, right? Like if you have decided that you're going to commit to improving access to leadership opportunities or recruiting people from different areas or different spaces, then you stick with that. You stick with that because this was a decision that was born from your values. And there's a value exercise that I do with my team sometimes, my leadership team sometimes, where it's a value clarification exercise. So for example, you might say, I really believe in fairness. Fairness is an incredibly important value to me. I really believe in it. Okay. Until your C minus son is not doing well in college and needs an internship, and you pick up the phone and you call a friend to get him one. Did you well, I still think you believe in fairness. You just believe in family, legacy, loyalty. You believe in other things more. And I do this exercise with leaders to show them that you've got to decide what are the values and how do you place them in a hierarchy, right? Because if you don't do that exercise, then when the storms come, you won't have clarity about what it is we do here and what it is we want to see happen here. So as we're seeing, a backlash, I think of the murder of George Floyd was just so pivotal here, right? So imagine you have some glasses and your glasses don't allow you to see the color blue, right? I think George Floyd's murder ripped off your glasses. Now you can see the blue and you are horrified. Oh, but wait, there's blue in healthcare. There's blue in education. There's blue in housing. Ooh, there's too much blue. Let me put the glasses back on. That's what we're seeing right now. People are trying to go back to a time they want to plug back into the matrix where it wasn't so hard and they could just sit in Starbucks and wear their Lululemons and act like the world was fine, right? They want to go back to the good old days that it felt okay, even if it wasn't okay. And so I understand that temptation, but we've got to resist the temptation to reject truth, right? I think there's two types of people in the world. There are keepers of the story and there are truth seekers.
Mm.
And what we have right now is a battle between these two groups. There are people who want to protect our understanding and our history, and our behavior more than they want to embrace truth and opportunity and a different future. They kind of prefer a hell that they know to a heaven that they can't imagine, right? And so what I see as my work is really selling the story of the heaven. That's the first thing, because nobody wants to trade their brand of misery for your brand of misery, right? So we need a higher goal that we're all working towards, right? But then also to honor their grief of the loss of their story.
Ooh,
um,
talk about the grief, Denise. Talk about the grief.
I
That hit
don't
the nail on the head.
Yeah. I don't think we talk about this enough, right? If you have been given a story, even a story that's inappropriate, a story of superiority, a story of almost guaranteed success, right? We have a whole swath of people that were told they're going to have a house with a picket fence and they're going to go to Disney every year and they're going to, like, literally they grew up with a story that is not coming to fruition. And it's very easy to blame you and I, to blame immigrants, to blame, for that story changing, right? We have introduced a level of competition that didn't exist before, right? So they have a grief around that loss that we don't talk about. And we say, get over it. And it's like, wait a minute. Like there is something to lose here. They do perceive this as a loss. So how do we create a space? First of all, they have to be invited into the conversation. You can't have a conversation about inclusion that doesn't include everyone, right? You can't have a story that feels like it's all it is criticism of one group versus another group versus another group. It's got to be a vision of how we can be better together and how we can have more, not less, right? And that's that grief, to me, unaddressed and unexamined is what causes an insurrection. It's what causes some of this backlash that we're seeing, where it's fear driven. I want my child to have the same life that I had. It doesn't matter how your life was curated or how it came to be. I want that for my child. Well, hmm, if I have to stop you or reduce your advancement to do that, I might be willing to do that. Right. And so these are the emotions that we have to exercise from these conversations. I remember when the state of Texas passed a law that said the top 10% of all high school students in public high school in the universe in the state of Texas were guaranteed admission to the University of Texas at Austin. It was a big deal. It was a very, very big deal. And I was talking to one of my coworkers in the office. This is a guy who makes $1 million a year, who's been making this money for years and came from wealth, and he was furious. And I was like, help me to understand why. Tell me why you're so upset. Like, I thought this is incredible, right? He said, this is terrible. Like, I went to that school. My father went to that school, and my daughter now she's not going to be able to go. I said, well, why can't she go? Well, she goes to one of the top private schools in the country, and now all the spots are going to be taken up by public school kids. And I said, but it's a state school. It's a state that is supplemented by state income, a state like resources. So you really think that your child's education needs to be supplemented in that way, as opposed to a kid from the valley? Like, walk me through your logic. And his logic was, that she shouldn't be penalized. I thought it was very powerful language. She shouldn't be penalized because she goes to a good school. And because she was I was like, listen to yourself. I said, so basically what you're saying is she has had the best education, the best nutrition, the best extracurricular activities, the best tutors, the best academic preparation, and she still cannot compete to get into this school. But you think she should get this seat because she's gotten everything else. You really believe that she you can pay for her to go to any school in the country and she can get in because you can just write the check. But she should get this spot because she's gotten every other spot. And of course, he was furious. He was livid. But I think that's part of our problem is we don't acknowledge or even register the grief of loss of certitude around certain ownership of spaces that they've had control of forever, right? And so how do we talk about that? How do we interact with that? And how do we I will go as far as to even say respect that grief. It doesn't
And
have
how
to
do
be
you do that? Like, when you're in these conversations with organizations and leaders, and then you're seeing this grief come to the surface, or really what probably presents itself as something else, which is really grief underneath. How do you handle that?
That's why I do the value clarification exercise first, because I'm only reflecting what you said you believe. 2 minutes
Hmm.
ago, you said you believe in fairness. And now I just given you this example of what could be more fair than the top 10% of every class from public high schools get guaranteed spot in the best public college? What could be more fair than that? Right? I was like, but literally, so when people talk about fairness, what they mean is protection of their historical
Yeah.
access to a space. And I challenge them. They're leaders. These are people who run huge companies and organizations. Like, you tell me how your belief system really fits in what you said a few minutes ago about what your values are, right? And I'm not saying it's like we can have a conversation about it being hard, that this thing that you perceive as a legacy is being broken. Let's talk about that. That's a sadness I can acknowledge. But Where you go too far is you decide that that kid that stepped over drugs, then dodged gangs and graduated number 3 in his class, he shouldn't get that spot over my child. That's like, that's when you go too far, right? And so how do the values that you say you hold, how do they align with your actual choices, your actual policies, your actual support or lack of support for the different initiatives that come across your desk? A space that I really see it is with employee resource groups. So you'll
Mm.
let's say this company has 15 employee resource groups, right? And maybe they have a leadership team of 17 people or 21 people, whatever, who run the different divisions and the executives within the organization. Why are only 3 staff members, 3 executives sponsoring all of the ERG groups, the employees resource groups? What is that about? And so I'll go in, the CEO is so thrilled to explain to me, we have all these employee resource groups and they're meeting and they're really having great experiences. And I say, well, tell me about this. Tell me about why the same names. If you have 20 leaders, why are only 3 people sponsoring all of the employee resource groups? What do you think that communicates? And they stop and they say, huh. Oh, and by the way, the 3 sponsors are the African American woman, the gay white male, and the Asian woman. Like, they are what do you think that says about your commitment as a leader to this effort? And he said, that we don't take it seriously. I said that you don't take it seriously. Exactly. I like that this is just a hobby, because
Yeah.
you're working those 3 people to death, first of all, because they are ripping and running all over the place because they care about this initiative. But
Without any extra pay,
without any
without
extra,
any
without any extra
yes.
admin support or whatever, like, they're
Yes.
just in the hot grease. And then you have the nerve to use this as a proof text when I come
Yeah.
in of how great you're doing. I said, do you think it's great? And they're like, no, it's not. No, it's not. And I think that's the space that I really try to focus is, tell me what you say you value, and now let's look at what you're actually doing, and let's make sure all of that is in alignment. And if it's not in alignment, let's change it. Let's change it,
Yeah.
because that's the biggest part of this is we have to let the story change, right? I have a little shrine in my office. It's got 3 things on it. And it reminds me to be humble and to let the story change. The first thing is an Airbnb sticker. Because if I have to be honest with you, if I was a venture capitalist and they had walked in, the pitch team, and they had said, hey, Sally and Simon, stranger from the internet, are going to stay in your house when you're not there, or even worse, when you are there, I would have said, no, honey. It would have been a no for me. And I would have been
Quickly.
I would have been a couple $1 billion wrong,
Yes.
right? Like, Airbnb is such a
Same.
and so I keep that to remind me I'm not always right. Right? The second thing on my shrine is a jar of Vicks Vapor Rub, because you could not have told me when I was a child that that was not the healing balm of Gilead. Like, your mom or your grandmother would rub it on your chest and on your back, and you knew that cold days are numbered. It's out of here, because the Vicks, we busted out the Vicks. Well, they've done hundreds of medical studies. Vicks Vapor Rub has 0 medicinal value. 0. It's essentially aromatherapy. And I have that on my shrine to remind me that something I was 100% sure of was not true. 100% sure was not true. And the third thing is a little Barack Obama bobblehead doll. Because I have to be honest, when he announced that he was running for president, I laughed out loud. I thought it was ridiculous. I thought there was no chance there would be a Black president in my lifetime. I did. And I wasn't wrong just once, I was wrong twice,
So
right?
even after the first time, you
No,
thought,
first time I
okay, okay, okay.
just like I thought it was
Yeah.
who is this little skinny man with this little strange name? Like, what are you talking about? Not possible. And I keep it on my shrine to remind me that you cannot allow the disappointments of yesterday to rob you of the possibility of tomorrow. You just can't, right? And so I think in these conversations and all of this work and everything that we're doing, this idea of keeping that humility and letting the story change, letting the situation be different, letting it be, okay, yes, you had 3 people doing all the ERG work yesterday, but you know how easy that is to change? That's an email. It couldn't be easier. And how do we look for these places and spaces that we can make small changes that drastically improve the quality of the experience of the employees and the people that we work with? And let's look for those. Let's look intentionally for those spaces. In the book, I talk about it in the context of like listen for echoes. Like be a person that is looking for the places that unintentional harm is being created, or an inappropriate barrier hurdle is being created, and just move them. Let's not make a lot of hype about it. Let's just move it. If you see it, change it. And if you could get to that space, like that's the way it moves forward. And I really tap in to the leaders' desire to have a great team. They want to win. They want to be successful. What's going to help them to be more successful? And I don't think that we talk about this work from that lens enough, right? Like that's such a powerful um, motivator, right? Instead of seeing this through the lens of loss or hard work or challenge, let's look at it as here's another growth opportunity. Here's a space where we can 2x or 3x our business because we are letting more talent and more genius come into the decision tree and into the leadership pool. Like that's all good news, right? And so we got to talk about it like that.
So good. So good. If you're joining us, please, if you have questions for Denise, please put them in the chat and we will try to address as many questions as we can while we are together. All that you're talking about, Denise, is great. It's necessary and it's also hard.
Yeah.
It is challenging. So I can imagine there being many leaders who are hearing you and saying, yes, we need it. Yes, I'm bought into being indivisible, but it feels too big to put my arms around. What do you say to those leaders? Like, how can they start? What can they do today? How can you help them see that it is possible to
Yeah.
make significant change?
It's a really important question because it's one of the biggest challenges to this work. We have to shrink the problem. We have to shrink the problem. If I am the head of a small drilling company in Houston, Texas, I am not in charge of the Supreme Court. I cannot affect, whether the statue should be taken down in Charlottesville. Like, I don't have power over every single dimension of our society. I have control and authority and responsibility to this small corner of the world. And I think that's a very important concept for us all to embody. We're seeing so much division and dissonance over the conflict with Israel and Palestine right now, and Hamas. And sometimes I have to remind people they are not inviting you to the negotiation table. You do not live there. You do not know. You are not in this in the way that you have inserted yourself. You have to shrink the problem and make sure that you are dealing with the problems and the opportunities that are in front of you, that you have the capacity to change. It's the 5-foot rule, right? What are you doing in the 5 feet around you? It is very easy to sit and watch the news all day and be consumed with other people's problems. Meanwhile, down the street from your house, the third graders can't read. The homelessness community is expanding by 15% every year. And you have no interest, no passion, no engagement in the issues that are immediately impacting your day-to-day life and your day-to-day community. It doesn't mean you shouldn't care about the bigger issues. We all do. But I think we have been, our attention has been hijacked in a inappropriate proportion, right? And so I call it like this. It's like you think we're all in a stadium, right? Imagine that humanity, we all sit in a stadium. And if everybody drops some trash at their feet, that stadium is wrecked. But what happens if everybody bends down and picks up the trash at their feet? It's an entirely different experience. So your question is such a powerful one because we've made the discussions about Supreme Court decisions and what's happening on college campuses and it's like sometimes I walk in and I have to say that's not your business. Your business is Jim has had 92% churn of any woman that works for him. How about we start with Jim? Let's work on Jim, right? And so we need to sometimes shrink the problem to the things that you can impact, and that's all the way around. That's all the way around. That's on all sides. How are we creating a better space? And in our context, that this will be a company, an organization. Okay, there's all of these things that are happening outside. They absolutely have an impact, but do they have an outsized impact? And are we doing the work in our actual organization that is creating opportunity and is eliminating the echoes of past harms? Are we doing that work? And so that shrink the problem is really almost the first thing that I start with when working with clients of like, what is your job and what's not your job? What is a problem you can solve for? And because we have defanged so many institutions in our society, the workplace has become mommy, daddy, grandpa, Uncle Joe. It has become everything because we've defanged government, we've defanged church, we've defanged we don't have community structures in the same way. People don't live in the neighborhoods that they grew up in. So we have that fragmented whatever. So people go to work expecting sometimes more than is appropriate. And so how do we even right size that? Right? We're not going to solve this conflict here in room 302 at this conference table for this global conflict. But what we can do is make sure we're giving mentorship opportunities to the women that are interested in leadership. We can do that. Like, what can you do and what's in your power is a really important first decision if you're going to do this work.
Oh, so good. So good. 100%. I love the idea of shrinking the problem. That just huh,
Yeah,
allows for
because
some exhale, right?
it makes you feel capable. Because
Yeah.
when the problem is too big, you feel helpless. You're
Yes,
immobilized. You're
exactly, and
immobilized.
then you want to do what's always been done because it's easy. It's
Yeah.
comfortable.
And you can't impact that big problem anyway. So let's just keep going the way we've been
So let's
going. It's
just
like, yeah,
no,
yeah, it's
but you
beyond me.
can. You
Love me
can.
now. Right. And so like,
Yeah,
how do you challenge that helplessness? That's got to go.
yeah,
Let's shrink the problem. Let's find the thing that we can address.
yeah. One thing that we haven't talked about that I remember, stuck out to me in the book was around metrics
Mm.
and measurements. And, the fact that maybe we are measuring the wrong things or getting too caught up in them, but that also there are things that we can measure. And
Mhm.
are we really doing that? So can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think where my biggest criticism of DEI is that it was corporatized, right? It was shrunk in a sense to make it manageable and to secure wins, right? And what do I mean by that? Um, we don't measure the hard stuff. We measure the stuff that we can show. We have 10% growth. We have 7% growth over the. So we kind of sought out and looked for the metrics that we could win instead of measuring the thing, right? And so the best example of this for me like is like motherhood. First, let me say, I think inclusion is a value. I don't think it can be measured. That I will say that, like, and that's
Mm.
controversial. I don't think you can measure a value. You can't measure love, you can't
Yeah.
measure kindness,
Yeah.
value. And so when we try to corporatize it, I think we're wrong out the gate. So I will say that. But let's say I'm going to value motherhood. I'm going to measure motherhood. And I'm going to pick 5 metrics. We love 5 metrics. Does you feed your child, you give them clothes, you have a roof over their head. You just pick the 5 metrics that you can be successful at, and you could be killing it on all 5 of those metrics, knocking it out the park. If you beat your child half to death every night, you are not a good mother. So the fact that you are doing great in these 5 spaces, that's not enough for you to be authentically operating in this value of motherhood, right? And so I see inclusion the same way. I think you can measure so many things, but the truth of it is, it's a value. It's a value that should be woven into the culture of your organization. It's not a program that you can grade. Oh, how'd that go? How'd that go? How the you we can talk about like initiatives and tactics and methodologies, and you can measure like the effectiveness and some of that. But I think the overarching desire to cram it into something you can put in the company's annual report has altered it and made it into something else. Right? I can measure 2 of each kind, Noah's Ark style. I can measure, and then look at what the legal challenges are. They're challenging the things that you're measuring. Right? So it's like this really circular kind of logic that happens. For me, I know when I work with clients, when they start to engage me, um, I decide who I work with or don't work with. One question. If they ask me to make the case for diversity, I don't want to work with them. Because if that's where you are, I'm not the right person to, because I'm not interested in
Yes.
explaining to you a
And
value.
convincing,
Right. I'm
like,
not interested in that.
mhm.
So a good comparison would be education. If you're like, hey, I don't know, should we educate all the children? No, this is not a school I want to work at. If that's how you're thinking about this, then we're not the right people. But if you're like, hey, we're having trouble educating these kids or those kids or engaging these kids, that's the place I want to be, because we have a fundamental agreement about what we value. Right.
Right.
And so I think very often we talk about this effort, this work, like it's a program. This program is working or it's not working or so. And the other thing about measurement that's really tricky, it's really tricky, is we don't give things time to see if it works. So it took hundreds of years literally to create the reality that we're in right now. But if it's not working after a year and a half, we're tapping out. This isn't working.
Mhm.
Right? Like I don't think you can be intentionally exclusive for hundreds of years and then be accidentally inclusive. It takes the same effort, the same work, the same energy, the same commitment, the same dedication. And we don't do that. I'm reminded again, another space story of when JFK, John F. Kennedy says, we're going to be the first people on the moon. And the folks at NASA were like, now what now? Like they didn't have any idea when he announced it. They didn't have any idea how they were going to do it. And they tried. First year, failed. Second year, third year, failed. Fourth year, failed. It took them 7 years to do it. What if they had stopped at year 5? What if they
Right.
didn't give it a chance at year 2? What if they started scuttling the program at year 3? Like that's kind of how we approach these things. We don't give it a chance to work. And we're not even clear on what working looks like and what it means, right? So I think that as we try to figure out how to do this work, that's why I do so many closed door sessions with leaders, because either you believe in this or you don't, right? Like there's a point that we can get to. Either you believe that people are inherently valuable, their perspectives and their different experiences are inherently valuable,
Yeah.
and we want to get the most powerful, effective team, and we believe that is by engaging the widest swath of people possible, either you believe that or you don't, right? And if you don't, it shows and it cascades down into your decisions. Even if you believe that, this work is hard, right? So
Yeah.
we can't even deal with you if you don't fundamentally believe that. Because even if I believe that, now I have to go looking for cobwebs and killing spiders, right?
Yeah.
Throughout the organization, right? So it's so important to put metrics in the right perspective as you think about this work. Yes, what you measure matters, right? You can't measure leadership. You can't measure integrity. You
Yeah.
can't, you know what I mean? Like there's something,
Yeah.
yeah, and like there's a example I share in the book of the oil and gas industry. It's a perfect example. It used to be normal business that you would lose an eye, you would lose a finger, you would lose a toe because it was just physically dangerous work, right? And they used to have safety as a program. And it's really fascinating if you've ever done work with oil and gas companies.
Yes. Yes.
They do not play. Safety
Oh,
is a value. They have a
yes.
safety. If you are having a meeting in the office, you are
It's a
not
safety moment.
have a
You
safety
start the meeting. You
because
start the meeting.
it is a
Yes.
part of every single thing
Yes.
they do. And they even
Yes.
measure, look at how they measure. They measure the number of days since
Yes.
the last
6.
incident
Yes.
because what we measure, the goal is perfection here, right?
Yes.
Like it's not,
Yes.
how do we, oh, we made a 2% increase. We made a two, like that's not what they're measuring.
No.
They're measuring how are we measuring ourselves against the value of safety. What if
Yes.
we could do that for inclusion? What if
Oh
that's
my
how we
gosh.
thought about it? Like, just think of how differently this would move and this would impact, right? And then it's really that would drive the choices and the decisions. And so that's really where I try to have leaders like center themselves of what is it that you think we're doing here? And if you really believe in it, what would you change? Like there's another thing that's really interesting to me. People ask me for a checklist all the time.
Oh gosh, not the checklist. We want a tip and a trick for everything.
5 ways
Tip,
to do
trip,
this,
checklist.
6 ways to blah blah blah. And I'm always like, I don't have any idea. Denise, how can I make my industry more diverse? I don't have any idea. I'm not in your industry. I have my own company. You know, though, you know that you go get
Yeah.
interns from your alma mater and from your sorority that by the way doesn't have any minorities in it. You know where you're fishing. You know where you're hunting. You know where you're putting the resources in. You know, right? And that's why I really believe like a big thread in my work, and I know your work too, is empowerment. Like
Yeah.
you are powerful enough to look at this situation and to see opportunities for improvement. And where you don't see those opportunities, when someone comes to you and says, hey, here's a concern, here's an issue, if you are a truth seeker who operates in integrity, you will receive that information and you will make the changes necessary. That's really all it comes down to,
Yeah.
right?
It's so easy to be like, "Oh, well, I don't know what to do, and now I'm a victim," and now, to our point earlier, we're not moving forward.
Mm-mm.
And we have more power within us. Each of us as leaders, I believe every leader is where they are for a reason. If they can take on the challenge of who and what can I impact
Right,
because of who I am, because of my values, because of my strengths, because of what I have the ability to do and who I have the ability to be, how can that shift things?
right,
Oh my
right.
gosh.
Yeah.
So, as we close, Denise, would love for you to share what is your greatest desire with this
Mm,
next chapter? Because I understand, when you write a book, you wrote that book a while ago. It's just now,
yeah,
in the world. So
yeah.
in this chapter you're in moving forward, what is your greatest desire?
Ah, what a beautiful question. Um, I want people to remember who they are, where they come from, and what they're capable of. You know, I have a personal muse, and that's Harriet Tubman. I think about this enslaved woman, couldn't read, couldn't write, had a seizure disorder. Order. She was disabled. She was brutalized as a child, and had the seizure disorder. Didn't have a map, didn't have a horse, didn't know anybody in the North, and ran by herself from the South to the North to secure her freedom. Like the story could stop right there and it would be incredible. This woman turns around and goes back. Turns around. Honey, I got to tell you, I don't know if I would have gone back. I don't know. I don't know.
Me neither.
I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know.
And she went back and she got like 3 people. And the next time she went back again, it got 5 people and 4 people over the course of years, being hunted, at one point the most wanted person in this would like find Harriet Tubman. And I'm just humbled. I'm humbled by the reality that I don't have less resources than Harriet Tubman had in the 1800s. I don't have less information. I don't have less literal money, literal power, I have more of every single thing than Harriet Tubman, except for courage, commitment, and consistency. That's what she had that we don't have today. So when I'm listening to people and they're explaining to me how they just can't figure it out and they just don't know what to do and they can't figure out the next step, I'm like, really? Really? Are you sure about that? So I think I I want us desperately to look at our history and to look at the very important work that people have done before us to allow us to be in this space right here, right now, with these opportunities in front of us. And ask yourself, like, do I have what it takes to do what I need to do? And I pray that the answer is yes. Right. And it's small, it's consistent. I mean, the going back to get 3 people and then 5 people, then 4 people, we don't have patience anymore. We don't have patience to do a little bit of progress all the time. If you just
Right.
move it a little bit forward all the time, what will you get? Right. So I think my hope for all of us is that we do not squander our giftedness. We don't squander our position, our opportunity, our privilege. We all have a privilege that was unimaginable to Harriet Tubman in the 1800s. And so, how do we honor that and do the work and start small and do a little bit more and do a little bit more and do it consistently over a lifetime because that's what changes things.
Denise, you are a gift. This work is so important, and I am honored to witness you and to see all this impact that you are having, and I just send you so many blessings, and I thank you for being here. I know that we're at time. Before we go, please tell people how they can connect with you, especially if they're interested in doing work with you.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, here's the amazing book in the flesh, Indivisible.
Yes, get Indivisible. No, first and foremost, everybody watching and listening.
And then I can be reached at denisehamilton.co, C-O, denisehamilton.co. And I'm at official DHAM on all the socials. So reach out. I've been getting about 150 letters a week which blows my mind. You know, people saying
Wow.
things like, I sat with my dad and I read this chapter and it was so powerful and it opened up a big conversation, or, you know, I never thought of it this way, or thank you for being so patient, and your stories, the examples, like I found myself in the stories. A lot of people say I can't find myself in a lot of this
Yeah.
discussion, but in this book I saw myself. So I just love that. So please keep them coming because they give me life. I just love every minute of it. But yeah, like reach out, and um I I warn you in advance. I walk through the world with an irrational level of optimism, and it's my plan fully to infect you. So if that is attractive to you, call me.
Yes, yes, and that's why you're my people, Denise. That is why you are my people. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your wisdom and your work with us, and I wish you all the best. Go buy that book, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.